Why are you wearing a boot, Laila? What happened to your foot?
I broke it while I was walking.
How did you know it was broken?
I went to the clinic to get an x-ray, and after the doctor saw my x-ray, he gave me his diagnosis.
This is a great example of how diagnoses are typically made. When it comes to brain injuries, however, it's much more complicated.
Much like my foot has observable symptoms associated with the break, such as redness and swelling, concussions also have observable associated symptoms, like memory loss and vomiting.
Subconcussions are hits to the head that are not significant enough to be classified as concussions and lack acute symptoms. While the details of subconcussions are largely unexplored, existing evidence suggests that they can cause negative impacts on cognitive function.
Student athletes that play contact sports such as rugby or football suffer recurring subconcussive blows to the head or subconcussive impacts. This accumulation of subconcussions can contribute to the development of serious and debilitating neurological conditions such as CTE and mental health issues like depression and anxiety.
These individuals are also unlikely to undergo clinical evaluation, even when changes in the brain are present, putting them at increased risk of future neurological injury. Over the past 2 years, Laila and I have worked with Brentwood faculty and 4 Brentwood alumni to conduct a neuroscience research study right here on campus. Our study investigated how subconcussive impacts affect the cognitive function of student athletes.
In our research study, we examined the changes in the brain function of student athletes who played contact and non-contact sports. In the last 2 years, we have performed over 100 brain scans on our peers at the start and end of their sport term to see how their brain functioning has changed over the course of a season.
We wanted to see if subconcussions were happening on our campus, in our gyms, and on our fields.
Much like my doctor used an X-ray machine to diagnose me with a broken foot, we used a device called Neuroscience to analyze the brain's reaction to stimuli targeting 3 specific brain functions: cognitive processing, basic attention, and auditory sensation.
Neuroscience combines software and hardware components to perform an electroencephalogram, known as an EEG. An EEG is a test that measures brain activity using small metal discs or electrodes that are placed on the scalp. It records electrical impulses neurons use to communicate with each other.
While the subjects of our study were undergoing an EEG, we played an audio soundtrack with an alternating series of congruent or incongruent word pairs and consistent or deviant tones. In our analysis of cognitive function, we focused on the brain's reaction to 3 specific parts of the audio soundtrack: the N100, P300, and N400. The graph above illustrates the pre- and post-season differences in the cognitive function of student athletes who played contact sports and did not suffer a concussion.
The blue line shows data from scans taken at the start of the season, and the red line shows scans taken at the end of the season. This graph is an average of male participants in the study and their response to hearing deviant tones. While a subject was undergoing an EEG, for example, they would hear beep, 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 beep. This graph shows the brain's response to hearing the deviant tone and how the amount of time it takes to recognize the different tone and the magnitude of that response changes after just 1 season of sport.
The N100 is the brain's initial reaction to hearing the deviant tone, or the beep that did not sound like the rest. The difference in amplitude or height between the 2 lines shows the strength of the brain's reaction to hearing this deviant tone. The red line being lower indicates that the brain has a more subdued reaction to hearing the deviant tone following a season of contact.
After the initial response to the deviant tone, the P300 shows how it is processed. At the end of the season, as shown by the red line, the P300 is delayed, or further to the right on the graph. This indicates that just 1 season of participation in contact sport can cause basic attention skills to deteriorate.
The N400 shows that post-season student athletes have a stronger yet slower reaction to realizing that the words of the incongruent word pairs do not match. An example of incongruent word pairs you would hear on the audio soundtrack sound like this: bread,
butter,
bread,
window. These changes are not just shown in the graphs, but reflected in everyday life. The students scanned, some of whom are in the crowd right now, may experience more difficulty listening in the classroom, focusing on homework, and struggle with executive functioning as a result of subconcussions.
There are also known effects of subconcussive impacts which cannot be quantified as easily, such as mental health. Brain trauma and CTE have been linked closely to decreased levels in mood and increased levels of anxiety. CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is a brain condition which is caused by frequent subconcussive and concussive impacts to the head. In extreme cases, this can be linked to the suicide of high-performing professional athletes such as numerous NHL and NFL stars.
Bo Jackson is a former NFL player, a Pro Bowler, and a Heisman Trophy winner. He suffers from symptoms similar to those of people diagnosed with CTE. If I knew now what I had known back then, I would never have played football. Never. I wish I had known about all these head injuries, but no one knew that. And the people that did know that, they wouldn't tell anybody. We're so much more educated on this stuff now. There's no way I would ever allow my kids to play football today.
Bo Jackson was a professional athlete who suffered frequent concussive and subconcussive impacts throughout the course of his career. While this may be an extreme example, it highlights the main point of this talk, which is that student athletes should be aware of the potential consequences of playing impact sports and their effects on brain health.
We'd like to thank all the students that took the time to get scanned, because without them, none of this would have been possible.
We'd also like to say a special thank you to Dr. Ryan Darcy and his team, Mr. Aidan Hepburn, Julian Wan, Derek Harrison, and Mr. David McCarthy. Thank you.
Thank you.